Come let go with me.
All right, here we are with another Cosmic Salon, and I have a real doozy for us today. I'm quite excited about it. This is going to be very interesting, and keep an open mind because this is challenging to some people that may be in some of these other camps regarding our history. And I know that this audience is going to eat this up, but just keep an open mind as we move forward. So I have Guy of the Antediluvian Landfill with me today, and I've pulled up his YouTube bio, but we'll get more into it. But I just wanted to give you a taste of this. So he's created this channel, this and Instagram, to reveal the complete discovery of an advanced prehistoric civilization covering the world. After extensive cataloging and collecting and research, he's ready to share and has been sharing this discovery with the world. He's got artifacts, megaliths, geoglyphs, and can prove this discovery. So we're going to get into this. There's a lot more here to be said, but I have deep dived everything he's put out. So I'm particularly feeling this. I really feel that there's something here. I can see it. And then anyone that knows me personally knows that I have a lot of artifacts out of China and Vietnam that are very strange, and so Guy brings that stuff onto the table. This is new information, and this is why I'm so thrilled to be here talking with you, Guy. Welcome to the Cosmic Salon.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
So let's start with your background a little bit and
Sure.
how you have these eyes to see this information, these things in the field, because some people don't. Now, I have this as well, and it started with just collecting, so many of us, right, are rock hounds, but also seeing fossils and stuff in rocks when I was little and all that, and pattern collecting. But how did you stumble upon this? What makes you this guy that can do this?
It's actually kind of funny because I was the guy that was making fun of those guys, actually. But where it kind of starts, actually, I grew up in West Virginia, and I was kind of one of those latchkey feral kids. And I had a lot of adventures and saw a lot of things. And I had one very specific memory of picking up this stone, and it looked like a serpent ahead. You know, it had fangs, and it clearly had like a triangle etched into it. And I talked myself out of it because, you know, I was probably, you know, late grade school, early middle school. And you're like, that can't be because, you know, these things are all supposed to be natural. It was one of those things. And so looking back, I realized my encounters with these things and how I like pushed it off, like just ignored it. And how as I went through life, I became the average perspective. You know, like the public education system did me well, right? and I just towed the line. Earth's history, you know, I accepted virtually everything. And 9/11 rolls around, and I joined the military, and this perspective is furthered, you know, where nothing metaphysical is there. And I actually, you know, grew up with a mother who was an herbalist and a hippie. So like, you know, I was raised right from that perspective, but it didn't latch on to me. But anyways, I go through this 20-year career in the military and in aviation and in fabrication. And that job actually fit me well because I was somewhat of an artist. I was good at sculpting and different things. And I actually pursued a job or a career in faux finishing prior to my military service. And so art was a thing for me, not graphic, but, you know, sculpting, things like that. And so my job, which was aircraft structures or sheet metal, like metal work, fit me well. And I was able to like excel, actually. I just kind of want to note this point because I actually got approached for a job at one of the sites. And in fact, the story kind of goes like this. I was working on this one aviation section for A-10s, if you're familiar with the Warthog. And I got a phone call, and this guy offered, he says, he has a special offer for a job in Vegas, but he can't tell me what it is, and I have to decide within 3 days. And I thought it was a joke, and I went and talked to my boss, and he says, "Oh no, that's Tonopah, the test range, like Area 51 stuff." And I was aircraft structures, and I realized that I was excelling at my job, and very likely my supervision had put me, up for at least the application. But I got a really bad feeling. It was kind of strange because if you would have asked me 10 minutes before, it was like one of those things I would have dreamed of doing. But when that happened, I just couldn't describe it. And it was like all of a sudden that metaphysical world was very real and I couldn't explain it. And that was like the first real slap in the face of everything might not be what it seems. And I didn't really share that with anybody. I turned the job down and went on about my life. But I finished my career, and I'm still of that perspective, like things are what they are, um, and I retire and I buy this home, and I'm hanging up Halloween decorations, and I look down and there's a statue head in my flower bed, and it. When I first saw it, I couldn't really make it out, but I do have ceramic experience, and I knew it was a ceramic piece, and it had a void where the potter, sometimes there's a void in your pieces that you find when you break them. It was like that. And so I knew it was man-made at the time, I thought. And you couldn't really make out a lot. It was like you had to hold it in the light, and a part of it looked feminine and another part looked masculine. And I ended up later discovering that it was like a two-faced statue head. One side appears more like the traditional alien, like the gray alien, big eye. That's why I thought it was feminine, because it had the same overall shapes. It was like curvy, let's say. But the other side was more like a skull or reptilian, if you could say. And it was wearing a helmet that seemed to be similar to that of the Olmec civilization. Those giant heads with the kind of funny helmet things.
Yes.
So that would be the best way to describe what that was. And on the earpiece of that helmet, actually, I was able to see that there was a hexagram, so six-pointed star, and AKA Star of David. It was encircled by an Ouroboros, which is very well known among the ancient cultures, and this blew my mind, because I'm in West Virginia. It shouldn't exist. We should only have native cultures, and that's pretty much it. And this was very advanced. The detail was pretty deep. The mouth of the alien side was actually the head of a snake, and it wrapped around the cheek to the other side, making the mouth of this, skeletal Olmec-looking head. And it also had snakes wrapping around its head like Medusa would. Overall, it had like a crown, which would be a snake head. So imagine like a snake head crown, almost like Conan the Barbarian kind of silly stuff, and then multiple snakes wrapping around the side. And so there's all these, key features, and I realized I had something. So you obviously go back to the location, and I found more and more, and there were things that were advanced, and it was absolutely not native, and the reason I began to notice these things was because of my background, because of my 20 years in fabrication and dealing with advanced composites and building things and making things. You have an eye for things that, have been altered. So it was more, and so much more that I found, like, if you've looked at all my stuff, all the photos that I share of that early portion are only like one or two flower beds. It's so ridiculous that how much I found and so I think, okay, whoever is quarrying this stuff, they're onto something that they don't know. And I just assumed at the time I might have discovered a local thing. And so I tracked down the builder and find out where it came from. And it turns out it's all dredged from the Ohio River. So there's this operation where they pretty much suck up rocks from the bottom and clean them off and sift them and sell them off to the flower beds, essentially, to the garden centers. And, that's great. but it kind of upset me because that meant that the potential for wherever that stuff was coming from was anywhere above the watershed, of that portion. So it could come from anywhere that feeds that Ohio River. And I realized, well, you're SOL because that's just, it could be anything. So I move on and keep my eye out, And in a random turn of events, I'm hiking and stumble upon a megalith. And the reason I noticed it was I didn't see it directly, but I walked by it. And because I had been handling these items so much, it felt familiar. And so I was able to document that. And when I saw that, I realized I was dealing with something much larger. It wasn't just the Ohio River because I had found something local that, couldn't have been moved. It was massive. And as I go about this process, I'm noticing that okay, if I find an item that doesn't have man-made features or whatever, it still seems to have a similar shape to the ones that do have features. Like river rocks get worn down. But what I'm saying is like of the things that I would find that seem to not be natural, I would also be able to find worn down river rocks that would match the same shapes. It was like they were standardized shapes almost. And when I realized that, I started categorizing everything I had. And it didn't actually deviate outside of many basic shapes. And that was, to me as a fabricator, that was standardization. That was mass production. But I didn't quite understand how to convey that. I was trying to make videos on it, and it's almost like I got some rocks that look the same. What do you do with that? Before I kind of got into those videos, I thought, okay, I gotta figure this thing out, and I used my fabrication skills, and I decided to create like a blueprint, like drawing. We would say lay it out. I wanted to lay out the pattern to create, as if I had to tell some other fabricator, hey, make this. And the thing I noticed very quickly was that they were all exactly the same geometry. And then as I began to measure more and more angles that were clearly measurable, nothing deviated from a 20-degree standard. So it was either 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120 degrees, and there was nothing in between. It was a very strict geometric standard. And it blew my mind. I couldn't believe that what I was saying. It shouldn't be possible. And right now, anybody that's listening to this could go to a local stream and you're almost certainly going to find a triangular stone. And when you measure that triangular stone, it's going to be either 40 or 60 degrees. And that shouldn't be possible across the world, but it seems to be, and we'll get there. So eventually what happens is I notice that in one of these YouTube videos, there's a lady talking about the native walls of North America. They're like serpent walls. And apparently natives have stacked up these walls all over, the hills of North America that are in serpent effigies. So they would take stones that would resemble serpent heads, and then they would stack them up in the shape of a larger wall serpent, if that makes sense. And I saw inside of one of these walls, one of those shapes that I had identified, and I'd realized, oh my gosh, what those natives were likely stacking up is the same stuff that I'm finding. And at this point, I still thought it was kind of like a local, regional, maybe I found the first advanced North American thing, but still primitive to some degree. I didn't realize how advanced it was going to get. After I determined, that there was this kind of funny standard, I began making like a second video. And while editing that, I noticed the first megalith that I discovered next to it was this face. It was, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's the one I always compare with the black and white photo.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I see that thing, and I had to go talk to my wife because I was like, okay, maybe I'm going too far because it was too big and creepy and obvious. And I'd walked by it multiple times and never noticed it. It was like the photo was what really aided the image. She saw it and my friend saw it, and I went back up to confirm, and it was carved. It was carved into the rock. But what's even more interesting was I had realized that what that was carved onto was another megalith, and it had fallen against the hillside, like in some type of event, and had actually trapped and protected the carvings on the backside of it. So I was able to climb up behind it and actually get a little bit of footage of it. And I was able to see pigments. I was able to see serpents, more hexagrams. There is definitely two alien looking faces. It's a really tight space, and I have to like put my hand on or my camera on an extension to get to it. But it's definitely looks like an alien face, you know. And but the big thing that got me was there was a nice straight line all the way through, as if it were, you know, like a cut line or a megalithic block, you know, like construction. And this thing was leaning against the hillside. It should have been natural, you know. It should have been leaning against, you know, natural stone. And that got me thinking, you know, that can't be serious. That, you know, these reels that we see on Instagram where it's like, you know, the covered pyramid. I think there's one in North Dakota or one of the Dakotas where there's like it's like a pyramid hill and people think it's a covered pyramid. And I always, no offense, you know, thought that was silly. And then but here I am, I was like, there's no way that that's true. So that kind of got me churning about what was really going on in the hills of West Virginia. So I look at Google Maps of the area and quickly realize that the place that megalith that I discovered happens to be, the way it's situated is up against an ancient river valley. And this is a dry river valley it ended during the last ice age. It stopped running. Some type of event, you know, caused it to redirect. And now it's the canal that flows into the Ohio River. Well, this river valley that is dry, the holler, we'll say, that's connected to it next to this megalith is very squared off, as if it were a harbor. And I couldn't help but notice it was like strangely perfect, you know, like if you measured it, it would be all be 90-degree angles kind of thing. That really blew my mind because then I thought, okay, so I've got some kind of river civilization that seems advanced, that seems to be popping up on different parts of the country. I need to back up a little bit. After I think it was around the megalith time, I also found a fossilized statue. I forgot to add that. So around the megalith time, it was this fossilized statue that looks like a Chinese dragon. I etched some of it off, the fossilization, to get the detail underneath, and it revealed like an optical illusion art. So multiple images making up one larger image. And what it was the portion that I revealed was like this vulture eating a fish. It felt familiar. And as somebody who has metal detected on military bases looking for cool stuff, I thought, there's a piece of metal detecting junk that I've got that looks almost identical to that. And I went and grabbed it, and I had a piece of aluminum that I swore was a melted pop can, but it had the same design as this fossilized statue head or dragon head. And this dragon head looks like the traditional Chinese dog dragon.
Yes.
Like when you think of that's
it
what
does.
it looks like. That kind of pops in all simultaneously with that megalith time. And that is what connected me to the aluminum. So there is prehistoric aluminum. This melted pop can matches this fossilized dragon head. I eventually found loads more that match multiple stones or artifacts and multiple fossilized items. It was like easy, which was strange because, okay, yeah, if I'm finding some prehistoric culture, it shouldn't be so easy to find duplicates and matches. I don't know if that makes sense. It just seemed, if you understood how much of an effort I've put into this, you would really be like blown away because I have lots of stuff and I've done not much as far as like looking because there's so much of it. It's so abundant. And I couldn't understand that. That was like heavy on me. The more I understood, the more I figured out the geometries, the more I knew what classified as whatever this culture was, the more things I found and the more big it became. So much that I was keeping it to myself. Like it felt uncomfortable. It shouldn't have been. And there was a hint in the back of my head that it was beyond comprehension, but I couldn't put my finger on it. So I ended up discovering the aluminum, and that ends up connecting to Michigan copper. And I had realized that, oh, all these little Michigan float copper nuggets that everybody finds also falls into these effigy categories and these geometries of this culture. And that made me realize that gold was too. So gold nuggets as they would find them in the streams in early America, would have actually been these statue fragments. And at that time, I thought that the culture was so old that the things that we were finding were just so destroyed, because they were very twisted and bizarre. It really looked like, I don't know, I couldn't really put my finger on it. But at the same time, my fabrication sense said that they didn't look damaged. You know what I mean? Like, so it was, okay, I've got these things and they fall into these geometries and they're mass produced, but they look kind of perverse. So I think they're damaged, but my expertise says that they're not damaged. And it was a very difficult thing to suss, like uh, I couldn't really figure it out. And so all I had to go on was this geometry thing. I just knew I can connect things. And then I ended up realizing, oh, if it's these stone walls in America, then it's certainly the Neolithic megaliths in Europe, like Karnak and all these other sites where the prehistoric guys, stacked up all those giant stones in solar alignment kind of stuff. I realized that they also connected to this culture, and I started looking at that stuff, and I realized, hey, in Europe it's the same. That means at minimum it's like a Atlantic thing.
Yes.
And that was like massive. That's like when you realize what you got, and but at the same time I didn't know how to convey it. Yeah, I didn't know what I had. I didn't know how to convey it. I didn't quite understand what I was dealing with completely, and I was trying to. I got the brilliant idea to go to Italy because why not? And see if I can't confirm some of this and reproduce the results. However, before I left, I was fortunate enough to stumble onto an excavation of a mountain. They're building a new resort, and they had to cut a new road. Okay, let me rephrase. Hill. This hill, not a mountain, spans. People will get offended. Like, West Virginia is hills. I get it. I know, the West people will say they're not mountains. But anyways, this hill that would span this ancient river valley, they were cutting into it. And I thought, okay, I better go look at it to see if I can't see, something interesting, if these things really are structures somehow. And I was truly blown away by what I ended up finding. At first, I saw something faint that it appeared as two dragons, I guess, nose to nose, like a side profile, nose to nose, and they were like geometrically perfect, both ways. I don't know if that makes sense. It was just like a plane, and it was like, we're taught that these layers of earth mean different things. And I'm sitting here looking at one of these layers and I see an image, you know? And so that tells me in my public education brain, okay, the sediment must have fallen in such a perfect way to create this coincidence of an image that looks like two dragons geometrically perfect. And I go on looking at this area and I see another large snakehead like image. And this is where the whole mud fossil thing comes in. I'll be honest, I was jumping on board at some point because, when I was getting into this topic, but not fully understanding what I was dealing with or what I was finding, there had to be an explanation for what everyone was seeing because I was seeing it too. The best one is down by Antarctica. There's like a giant snakehead that's hundreds of miles long. And it seems to kind of like, I don't know, it's just the islands around Antarctica look like this giant snake. And some people will say, oh, that was this Titan animal that died and fossilized. And you'll see these massive images that will span hundreds of miles that resemble organic things. And so there's a whole movement of individuals saying these things were once alive. And I had a hard time with that. I was seeing it. I was seeing things on Google Earth just like everybody can. And there was no better explanation. Here I'm faced with a new situation where I'm looking at this hillside that's cross-sectioned essentially, and I'm seeing an image. But I know that it's not an animal. It's an image because the two dragons coming together, it was like basic geometry. It wasn't like advanced. It was a very basic rudimentary dragon. It wasn't like, I don't know, it's pretty much like two rectangles radiused, it was strangely basic, so much so that it couldn't have been natural, because sometimes, these natural formations, you can argue, oh, that looks like, this cloud looks like a, dragon or whatever. It wasn't like that. It was like hard geometry. And so, I see more stuff. But what broke what tipped the scale rather, was this, what appeared to be like a shark mouth. And it was uncanny. Might as well take it right off of a World War II fighter airplane. Just like that traditional cartoon dragon with the curve, the kind of like the curvy nose art. It was in this hillside. And I know that something that we hold in our traditions as an Air Force member and as somebody who has painted nose art and tail flashes, I know that that nose art means something. And then now I'm seeing it in these prehistoric layers. There's no way that that's an organic creature. What that is art. And as I looked at the other things that were in that area, I realized it's art. But what's the story on this hill? And so as I look at the maps of the hill, I realize the whole hill is the shape of a shark. And it sits perfectly, like catacorner in the river. It would be the perfect pinch point or strategic area to restrict flow of traffic, like a security spot. I thought, okay, so they formed this and created this strategic area for, something tactical. That's very advanced. That's so far beyond mound builder stuff. That's it's a pretty big deal. And then before I left, I thought, oh, I better, go on the rest of this mountain hill and see what I could find. I ended up finding, okay, so if you're a rock hound, you will have almost certainly found like this clod of dirt that will have designs in it. And it almost won't make sense, like, because it'll just be dirt. But when you look at it closely, sometimes it'll look like a statue head and have real intricate designs, but as you squeeze it, it'll just fall apart.
Yes, the concretions, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's like what I thought at the time that it was decomposed, like it was an organic material that they use, maybe like a paper mache, and then it just turned into something else over time.